who are doing it.
But you see, this is the problem, of course, with Einstein 2 and Einstein 3 and other, government-initiated network detection methods. To their, recognition. I mean, it's part of their mission. That's part of what the NSA is supposed to do. They're supposed to locate that content. But if you put them in the security business and they're looking for malware,
you cannot put
NSA
in the business of looking at things in the United States. I mean, we've got to draw a line. We've got to find somebody other than NSA. We have to move the burden to the ISPs and to other places. But I think there's another issue here, which is what can government do? We're all afraid of government regulation and government invading our privacy. What can government do to help solve this problem that doesn't raise these hairy issues? And one thing it can do is relate to other governments. Right now, cybercrime pays. Let's just be upfront about it. Cybercrime is not script kiddies anymore. It's very sophisticated international gangs that work with the connivance, support of the government of Russia and the government of China. And we talk to Russia and China about lots of things, but we don't ever make this a big issue. And we've never tried to structure an international solution, getting other countries involved, as we've done on money laundering and so many other things. We've never done it on cybersecurity. And
why is that?
Well, because I think people in the government don't understand this issue to a very large extent.
No, I don't think that's quite fair. I think the big problem has been attribution. Something emanates from a particular country. We had the attacks in Estonia, we had the attacks in Georgia. Let's assume, first of all, that the server, which appears to be the genesis, is in fact not just an innocent third party that's been hijacked. Even so, you have to ask the question, did the government foster it? Did the government turn a blind eye to it? Is the government simply incapable of dealing with it?
And
it's hard to prove.
There's a way of solving that, which is have an international treaty that puts an obligation on every country to police its own cyberspace. And so you don't care whether it was the government or whether it was some hacker club that the KGB or FSB didn't know about, as though there could be such a thing. We have to get over our government's hang-up on having arms control in cyberspace. We've got cyber war now, right? We've got this cyber command with weapons and a 4-star general, and we have no strategy that anybody knows about, and we have no arms control.
Well, there is no art of cyber warfare yet. There is no military college teaching this kind of stuff. Nonetheless, are we carrying out cyber offense against other countries?
Of course we are.
Say more.
Yeah, look, if you think that the story was true that China or somebody has laced the U.S. electric power grid with logic bombs, I think you'd have to be naive to assume that we haven't done that to China.
Yeah.
And what sort of situation does that... Back up. What if that Wall Street Journal story had said, plastic explosives were found on the high-tension distribution wires throughout the United States, and we have reason to believe that the people who put them there were Chinese agents? The Congress would go crazy. They wouldn't serve Chinese food in the cafeteria, all of the usual kind of stuff.
Freedom chow mein.
Freedom chow mein. But you make it a logic bomb and nobody notices.
Yeah. But I think, part of the problem here is it is the difficulty of proving where something comes. Let's assume we said that every country is responsible for policing within its own borders. And then it turns out someone from another country has hijacked computers in our own country. Mm-hmm. And then the question becomes, and Marc will relate to this, so the U.S. government has now an obligation to shut that down.
Right.
But wait, someone's going to say that violates my Fourth Amendment privacy right. So other countries are going to turn to us and say, well, you've got an obligation to shut this down. We don't care about your Fourth Amendment. Do it. That's what makes this a very, very hard problem.
It's not that hard.
But
Marc, jump in.
Let me just come back to Richard's point, because I don't think it's true that at this point the United States is ignoring the international dimension. In fact, I think Secretary Clinton's recent speech on internet freedom was almost a direct response to the Chinese hacking incident involving Google. Now, she had to walk a careful line there, in part because of the attribution problem. And if you're not absolutely certain about what you can say, at least in public, you're going to be cautious. But the way in which she elevated the issue, and if you read the speech, I think it's fairly clear that she was saying to the Chinese government, listen, we're aware of this, and we're not going to ignore it. So that piece is in place.
Yeah, but she's unwilling to engage in cyber arms control.
Well, that may be the next step. But let's also say that the United States, through the Council of Europe, pushed very aggressively to get support for the Cybercrime Convention over the last 5 years.
And Russia didn't sign it, and there's no sanction.
Yes, but your criticism was that the United States government wasn't doing enough to reach out to its allies.
Arms control.
And I think we're beginning to see the government take those steps from the privacy perspective. Look, we don't have a big problem with promoting sensible policies and people working together. We're going to have concerns at the point that someone comes along and says, now we want user authentication, or now we want some other technique that's going to, catch everybody's online activity.
Let's come back to the Fourth Amendment. So the Russian attack on Georgia, in part emanated from a server in Brooklyn. And once you can establish that, you can get a warrant. There are service-level agreements. There are all sorts of ways that you can go in and stop that. And there's not a Fourth Amendment barrier.
But the ability to do that rapidly and the ability to do that in every instance is going to be a potential obstacle. I'm not disagreeing, by the way. I think that there is a commonality of interest to some degree. For example, every country that deals with a global financial system has at stake maintaining the integrity of that system. Something that corrupted trust in the financial system globally would affect the Chinese and the Russians in the same way that it affects the U.S. So I think that there are areas where there is room for this kind of incremental movement. The second thing I think we need to do is, and this is part of the cybersecurity initiative, which we inaugurated a couple of years ago. I think I spoke to this group about it a couple of years ago, and now finally it's been, at least a summary's been declassified a couple of days ago. Part of that is to really think through the strategy in the 21st century for cyber attacks that, as we thought through the Cold War and nuclear deterrence. And that means doing almost another Project Solarium, where you bring together people who think through what are the architectural problems, the legal problems, the diplomatic problems. Do we need a declared policy of retaliation? Do we need to say what the red lines are, what we would do in this case or in that case? Hard issues. We may disagree, but we've got to start talking about this, and we have not really gotten very far.
And it's got to be a public discussion.
Right.
Because right now, it's all classified, top secret, and the public doesn't know about it, the media doesn't know about it, the Congress doesn't know about it, and that's a recipe for making mistakes.
As grueling as all that might be, we have precedent and ways of handling it. We had attribution problems with brush fire wars and assassinations. We took care of that. We had various ways of pressing people to change their behavior. We had mutually assured destruction, and I assume there's some cyber version of that.
I'm not sure there is.
Okay, maybe there's a version of that. But there's a whole other half of the problem. Away from great powers and their gangs, a North Korea hacks you. What are you going to do? Go after the 10K pros they have in that country? Right. What is the way you counter small states that harbor criminals?
So exactly. So part of the reason deterrence doesn't work in cyberspace is attribution, number one. But number two, you could be attacked by a North Korea. We know North Korea has engaged in cyber attacks on South Korea and on the United States. On the last 4th of July, there was a major North Korean attack on systems in the United States. They launched those attacks from China because they have so little connectivity in their own country. Mm-hmm. But to say you're going to have mutual assured destruction, there's nothing to attack.
Yeah, we put them into the Stone Age. It's a move forward.
Well, but cyber war against cyber war, they need to have cyber systems. When we went into Afghanistan in 2001, I asked NSA to develop a plan to attack Afghanistan, also with cyber war techniques. Right. They came back to me and said, what the shit do you think we're going to attack?
Yeah.
Well, but actually that raises another point which we haven't discussed. A certain element of the strategy obviously involves the question of deterrence and how you deal with people who attack you, but part of it is resilience. It's building the capability to deal with the fact that your cyber assets may be impaired. And, sometimes it's a mechanical fix, something you need to be able to shut off something if, in fact, someone gets into it in cyberspace. Sometimes it's redundancy. Sometimes, frankly, and it may be heresy to say this here, it is a low-tech response. I mean, I find if I have a really important document, I print it out. I know that's really kind of caveman stuff, but no one can hack into a paper document. Mm-hmm. So sometimes using different levels of technology introduces an element of resiliency that I think has to be part of a strategy.
There was a guy who said, if you want to keep something secret, don't put it on a computer. Was there Schmidt?
Yeah.
So, there is something to that.
There are some simple things.